This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. I am super excited. I know Jennifer is. We're going into the ocean, but I am super excited because we are talking about marine biology in a way that we have never done so before.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so exciting. What problem are we solving today?
How do sea creatures inspire technology?
Ooh, how do sea creatures inspire technology? Two of my favorite things, ocean and technology. This is going to be fabulous. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
We have got the right person to talk to. We have the wonderful Dr. Karen Osborn. She is a marine biologist at the Smithsonian.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Karen.
Thank you very much. It's fun to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. We get to talk about one of my favorite places on this whole planet, the ocean. Yay! Right? So I'm curious, as a kid, did you always want to go to the ocean and study the ocean?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, so I really wanted to go to the lakes.
Okay.
But there's
Mini oceans.
There's not massive amounts of things in there like there are in the ocean. There are lots and lots of things. But no, I loved running around in the woods, playing in the streams and in the lakes and things like that. I had no idea what was out there in the ocean and how cool it was until I was in college, actually. And I went and taught high school for a year in Micronesia, where I did a lot of diving.
Okay. That makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and I almost feel like that's cheating. You were actually, it wasn't just like you went to the ocean and were like, oh, wow, it's really big, it's really pretty. You were in the ocean.
Wow.
So when you were diving in Micronesia, were there specific fish or animals that you saw there that really piqued your interest?
Yeah, so diving in Micronesia is probably one of the most beautiful places to dive in the world, I think, having dove at several other places since then. And the animals that piqued my interest were all the animals I did not recognize. I had done 1 year of college already. I had taken, general biology and learned about all the different animal groups.
Right.
And I dove underwater and I looked at those coral reefs. And I saw things I had no idea what they were, like literally no idea what kind of animal they were. And that was what really sucked me in, was all these weird, bizarre, beautiful shapes and crazy animals that I wanted to know more about them because they were so strange, totally nothing like the birds and lizards and snakes and bugs and things that I had looked at when I was growing up, running around in the woods.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is in biology you didn't learn a lot about the creatures of the ocean, or maybe all the different ones. So are there any ones that kind of definitely piqued your interest that maybe you went back and looked up?
So my favorite group of animals kind of has always been polychaete worms. And polychaete worms are segmented marine worms. So they related to earthworms, right? We're all familiar with those. We all dug them up. We all played with them, But the marine version, the ones that are in the ocean, come in about 20,000 different kinds.
Wow.
What?
Yeah. And they are beautiful, many of them. And they're frilly. They look like a fern frond that swims around. They shoot yellow bioluminescence out the tips of their arms. They come in every color. They bioluminesce. ripples of color down their back. They're the most amazing animals ever. And so the first one of those that I saw on the coral reef were Christmas tree worms. So you see all these huge, beautiful corals, and sticking up out of them are these rainbow colored Christmas trees, little about an inch to 2 inches tall. And they were so beautiful. And if you wave your hand over them, they all suck down in, and then they hide and come back out. Like, I just thought they were so cool. And then I found out they were worms, and that just, it made them even cooler.
Most people would be like, ew, worms. You were like, worms, these are so cool.
Okay. So you've already, my mind's already blown. This is fantastic. So we introduced you as Dr. Karen. So you have your PhD in this. How many of these 20,000 worms do you know a lot about?
Oh, like 10. No.
Not the answer I was expecting.
Not the answer you were looking for. Okay, some, definitely not all. I would say a very small fraction of them. First of all, partly that's because I tend to focus on the ones that are far out away from shore, that live out in the open ocean. It's very hard to get out there and find them and actually get to watch them, because they're just kind of out swimming in the deep ocean. And so we don't know a whole lot about them. We know there's a bunch of them out there, and we know that they're diverse. We know that they're important because they're eating things, they're being eaten by things, they're making big egg cases that float around out there and feed lots of things.
Okay.
But that's about it. We don't know much else. We don't even have names for most of them.
Oh, wow.
So I would say most people, the more education you get, the less you're going to say you know.
Okay.
No, that's
that
true.
actually makes a lot of sense.
Because you realize how much is out there that we don't know anything about. And when we dive into the ocean, there is a lot of stuff that we don't know anything about. And I find that personally super exciting. I didn't find science that exciting when I was in high school, because I was like, well, you're just teaching me stuff that people know already. How would I make a contribution to science, right? If we already know everything, what good is one more scientist going to be, right? So it didn't really catch my interest until I jumped in the ocean and saw how much stuff we don't know anything about. Because I asked people about all those weird things that I saw, and they were like, I don't know. Maybe it was a sea cucumber. I don't know. Maybe it was a jelly. They didn't really know. So.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's really cool. And I know, since you and I spoke at World Ocean Day at the Smithsonian, that you have not only studied them, but you've thought about them in other ways. So, which leads us to our big question: how do sea creatures inspire technology?
Ooh, so this is where just your curiosity about what all the animals are that are out there and how they function and how they live turns into, can we actually use that knowledge to make our lives better? Not just understand the world around us and appreciate it and want to take care of it, but to actually improve our lives or do something useful. And there is a lot of inspiration out there, right? These animals have been out there in the open ocean. They've been evolving for millions of years. They've been trying to deal with the habitat the way it is. And it is pretty challenging out there in the open ocean. It's a difficult place to live. So they've come up with a lot of solutions to things. One of the things that's really interesting out there is that there's no place to hide. So fish and little animals that live on a coral reef, if a predator goes by, they just dive into the reef, right? And they hide cracks and crevices. When you're in the open ocean, you're in the open ocean. There is
nowhere to go.
Reef, there is no cave, there is no seaweed, there is nothing there for them to hide in. And there's a lot of hungry predators around. And so when we look at open ocean animals, we see lots of adaptations for camouflage or ways to hide. Lots of animals are transparent, so you can see right? You don't even the predators see them because they're transparent, or they're mirrored, so they just reflect back all that blue water that's around them. And so that is a good way to camouflage. When you go deeper in the ocean, what we tend to find is a lot of the fish down there are really black, because the deeper you go in the ocean, the less light there is, there is, darker and darker it gets until it's completely black down there, except for bioluminescent light, which is the light that animals around down there make, which a lot of the animals down there make light. And so if you want to hide in the deep, dark ocean, it's a really good idea to be black. So done a little bit of research on how fish in the deep sea make themselves so black and why it's important for them to be so black. And yeah, that actually is a really useful thing for technology because, like, if you want to think about soldiers or somebody who are trying to do these operations at night and they need to be
camouflage,
all in black, or like the ninjas, right, that are all in black. If it's really, really black and no light is going to bounce off of them, that's great. That helps them really blend in. So that's a useful thing. We like black materials, like the insides of telescopes and the insides of camera lenses are lined with ultra black material that doesn't let light bounce off of it. Well, it turns out that these fish actually make their skin just as effectively black as the insides of those telescopes.
Whoa.
Okay.
But they're just fish.
I was gonna say they do this naturally, right? Like
they have figured out how to do it just naturally. They do it actually more simply than we do it.
Well, that makes sense.
Build an ultra black material. Well, there's a whole bunch of ultra black things. Ultra black means it absorbs 99.9% of the light.
Oh, wow.
99.95% of the light that hits it, right? So light hits it, nothing bounces back. It just looks like a black hole. And so we can make materials like that. And there are like butterfly wings or bird of paradise feathers that are ultra black. So light hits them and nothing bounces off.
Okay.
And those animals usually use that ultra black to make their bright colors look brighter. So if you put this ultra black around these bright colors, those colors pop even more. But in the deep sea, they're using it differently. Normally, when you build something that's black, you do it with two different things. You have pigment to absorb the light.
Right.
That's melanin usually. And you have some kind of structure above that pigment that traps the light next to the pigment, so the pigment has more time to absorb the light.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So it doesn't reflect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because light comes in, some of it gets absorbed, but some of it's going to bounce back off, right? And something's going to see that. In the deep ocean, where everything is hungry and everything is looking and they have all these big eyes.
A little flash.
Right.
It only takes a photon, one photon to give away your position, right? So you don't want any photons bouncing off. So what fish do, they don't have a lot of resources, not a lot to eat down there. All they have is their skin. So instead of having this two-step system, they've created a one-step system where they use the pigment itself, the shape and the size, and how they arrange that pigment to actually trap the light next to the pigment, and then the pigment all absorbs it. So they have this super efficient system that they've come up with to make themselves ultra black, right? Because they're swimming around. Something is, shining a searchlight around looking for them. And if they blend in perfectly with the black background, like if all the light just disappears into them, just the way it disappears into the long distance, they're not going to get eaten, right? So it's a super effective camouflage in the deep ocean. And these fish have figured out how to do it multiple times. Multiple different groups of fish have kind of come up with the same solution. We can see that there's little tiny differences in the way that they do it. So it's not, something that happened once and everybody's, doing the same party trick. They've figured out how to do it multiple times.
Right.
So it's
okay.
That's amazing.
Hey, that's amazing. Yes. Yeah. Perfect word. That's amazing. That is super cool. And B, that leads me to, I don't know if this is an obvious question or not. How did we then find these fish?
I was going to ask that too. How did we see them?
Did you stay down there long enough to finally see one of them move, or how did you all do it?
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of lights, and actually most of the fish that I worked on, we caught in nets. So there was no seeing involved until they came up into the light. And when they're in the light, they're super easy to see. But actually, I got started on this project just purely out of curiosity. To me, curiosity is one of the most important things for you to become a scientist, or anything you do, you should do with curiosity. Because I was working on a bunch of other projects on worms and stuff that we'll talk about later. But we collected this fish and it had really weird, interesting skin. And I was doing another project looking at some other skin on some other animals. And I was like, wow, that fish has really weird skin. We should look at that. And I asked a bunch of my scientist friends, how do fish make themselves black? Because I try to take pictures of them and all I get are these really terrible pictures. They're just silhouettes. They're horrible, but they're really cool fish. They have all these bumps and teeth and
Right.
spikes and stuff on them. And I can't get that in any of my photos. What's going on? And they said, I don't know. They just have a lot of pigment probably or something. Who knows? Nobody's ever looked. And so I was like, well, I'm going to look.
Okay.
I'm going to look. So I
What do
took
you mean
some
nobody? That's a challenge, right? Nobody's ever looked.
Exactly. So then there's lots of stuff like that in science, right? There's places where, you ask a question, what's going on with this? And at some point, somebody will say, nobody knows. Nobody's looked yet, right? And so that's a great opportunity to go in and investigate. So I took a bunch of fish skin samples and put them under this high-powered microscope and looked at what their pigments look like. And I kept seeing the same thing in all these different fish and stuff. And then I worked with a physicist who modeled the shapes of these pigments and stuff, and we figured it out. So it was a fun thing, and it's probably the only project I've done where it's an obvious, direct link to how we could develop some technology, right? Because normally these ultra black things that we line the insides of cameras with, they're really expensive and really delicate because you have to have this really fine structure to capture the light, physically capture the light. You have to have the pigment. Well, that really fine structure is super delicate. But if you can just take the pigment granules and you can make them the right size and arrange them the correct way, done. Easy, simple.
Yes.
Okay.
Bacteria can grow this stuff. It's the same pigment that we have in our skin. It's just melanin.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty cool. So now there's a whole bunch of research labs that are working on how to grow this stuff, how to build things, how to use this material instead of having to, grow these carbon tubes and all the other weird stuff that they do to make ultra black.
And all of this came from your curiosity.
It did.
See, and that's what's amazing.
Super cool.
That is, and that's what I think is really cool for kids and people of all ages to know is that a lot of people, like you said, think, oh, we know everything there is to know about science. No. And it's curious people like you that all of a sudden can find something and turn this into something amazing. So let's go back to the sea worms. Were you able to find anything that perhaps you could use with the sea worms, some kind of technology that might link over there too?
So there's all these beautiful worms that live out there, right, that I was talking about before, and they live in the open ocean. And another thing you have to deal with not only is having hungry predators coming at you from all directions in the open ocean, but you don't have any place to sit down and rest, right?
Right.
So you can't just
there's no benches. There's
no benches. There's no sleeping bags. There's no
picnic tables. No.
You're just there. So all these animals, they have to figure out a way to not use up all their energy just swimming around all the time. Because if they sink to the bottom, they're just going to get eaten because there's even more predators concentrated at the bottom, right? So they want to figure out up and swim around. But they don't want to use all their energy up doing that. And so most of the animals that are up there are really good swimmers, super efficient, very maneuverable, so they can get away from these predators and stuff. I love watching these worms. There's a particular kind of worm called a gossamer worm, and they actually look like a fern frond, right? They're kind of tapered at both ends. They have all these beautiful appendages that stick out either direction. Some of them have this long tail, like a kite tail, and they are completely transparent usually. Sometimes they come in yellow or red or purple, but generally they're transparent or kind of bluish. And they're absolutely beautiful to watch swimming. Search it up on YouTube, look for gossamer worms swimming. They're gorgeous. I could watch them for hours. I was interested in how they do this because actually they can outswim our robots, which is a little bit embarrassing.
Wow.
And, these robots that we send down into the deep sea to catch things and to look at things, we spend a lot of money on them, right? They cost $1 million or something to build. And then when a little worm can outsmart you or outswim you, it's a little bit embarrassing. And so I got curious again about how these worms were able to do this swimming. And I did a little bit of research to find out what we knew about how worms swim. And there was back in the 70s, like long time ago, I've done research on how polychaete worms swim, how these segmented worms swim. And they're like, okay, they have this body wave and they have, they use the pressure, kind of like the pressure in a water balloon. They use to move themselves around and stuff. And that's how they do it. And I said, no, well, that doesn't work for these worms because they don't have bristles that they can use as paddles to swim. And they don't have, individual water balloons for each segment. The whole animal is a big water balloon. So how are they doing this? And I talked to some of my friends who are engineers, and they were like, I don't know, that's kind of an interesting question. Let's figure it out. So they pulled out
more curiosity. There you go.
Yep. That's what drives us to do what we do. So they pulled out their high-speed cameras and we filmed these worms swimming. And then we tracked where each appendage goes and how they actually move when they swim. We call that kinematics. It's the science of how things move, basically.
That sounds neat.
And we figured out how they moved. And I was like, well, this is super cool and interesting. And the engineers were like, well, yeah, that's fine. But it's really cool because now we can build robots that move like this. And now we have all these new ideas about how they can actually accomplish it.
That's fantastic.
And these days, there's actually this really cool field called soft robotics. So instead of building a robot out of hard pieces and parts and having all these joints, they build it out of soft material that can just kind of flow and move, and they can extend it and retract it and stuff more like an animal. So we use the inspiration that we take from these animals to actually inspire how they build their robots and things.
That's awesome. It's so cool.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, I am going to say it because I don't know if you will, but you have a book that is a lot about how scientists have found ideas like this all throughout nature and figured out, wow, that's really cool. We kind of have some uses for this stuff. And it's not very difficult to get either scientists or engineers interested. So now I got to ask, is there a new robot in the process for you to be able to send down to study these worms that gave away its secret about how it swims?
Oh, I like that idea. I really like that idea. We need, instead of our big mechanical, ROV remotely operated vehicle, I want a giant Tomopterus with a big camera instead of eyes in the front to go and chase these guys. That would be so fun to fly, first of all. And but then also fun to actually be able to keep up with these guys and catch them, because it really is embarrassing when they just outmaneuver us and lose them.
Well, I mean, so we're talking biomimicry, right? That's basically what all of this is. And they do have fish that they have created that can go into some of the schools and kind of look sort of like a fish, so the other fish don't know it. So scientists have used that to kind of find out what the fish are doing, what they're all about, their ecosystems and how they operate. So yeah, but yours might be a little more slick and have to go way faster, right? And maneuverable. So
It could be. I think what the scientists, a lot of them have in mind for this particular thing is that if you want to get a camera up a vein or something like that, you want it to be able to swim one direction. You don't want it to have to turn around and come back. You want it to just swim backwards back. You want it to be soft, so it's not poking things on its way and stuff. So that is actually kind of a useful tool to build these little, probes and things like that.
Well, and very helpful to humans. I mean, for anybody who has to undergo that. But just think about it. There's so many different applications of technology that you could do. Once you figure out how to do it, then you can have fun just, having people do different applications. Like, oh, I want to use it for this and I want to use it for this. For you want a better remotely operated vehicle so you can study these things better. And also you could probably study other things better too, right?
Yeah.
With that, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Sure. It would be really cool because they do other cool things that we haven't researched yet, right? We've only just done the first part of studying how they swim to kind of get the basic, like, how do they do it with their strange bodies? But other things, they move through the water with hardly disturbing the water except for just in the plane that they're moving in, right? So a lot of animals out there in the deep sea, they feel the water movement, right? Because it's mostly dark, not a lot to see. So a lot of things just don't even have eyes, or they have really poor eyes. And Water smell doesn't travel as well in water as it does in air. So a lot of smelling is maybe not always the best sense either, but feeling water movement is really useful, right? Think about the lateral lines on fish. That is to feel the water movement around them. So a lot of things are sensing a predator coming by feeling the water movement. And these guys, from what we can tell from this high-speed video, they don't really disturb the water hardly at all. They just kind of make this little tube through it without disturbing it around. Think about a motorboat, right? There's this huge band of disturbed water behind it, right?
Wake,
That's what these worms should be doing. They should be leaving this huge wake behind them, but they don't. They just kind of dig their way through the water without disturbing anything except for just the water they're touching. It's really cool.
That is a super
haven't
cool
even gone
thing
there yet.
to have found out. I want to ask, is there something that's out there in the ocean that you have not yet pointed your curiosity at that you're thinking about targeting in the future?
Oh, man. So many. How much time do we have?
First one that comes to your head.
So actually, we've started looking at how a certain group of crustaceans sees. So there's this little group of crustaceans, only about 240 species of these things. And they all live up in the open ocean. And some of them have no eyes whatsoever, right? They've just given up on seeing. There's like, it's too hard to see here. I don't need eyes anymore, right? So they've given up on seeing. Other ones have replicated their eyes. So not only do they have one pair of eyes, they have two pairs of eyes.
Wow.
And then other ones, 35% of their body is eye.
Wow.
Whoa.
That is a lot. Of
That's a lot of eye.
35% of their body, right? That's a third of their body is eye, all dedicated to seeing. And so there's tons of variation in their eyes. And we want to know why there's so much variation in their eyes, because they all live in about the same range. They all have about the same stuff to look at.
Yeah.
And we want to know why they have so many different kinds of eyes. And so what we're doing is studying those eyes in detail to see how each one works specifically, to see what that animal is looking at. Because the other thing about, these animals with big eyes in the deep sea, we can't just go down there with our robots with our big bright lights and look at them.
Yes.
Kind of disturbs them.
Yes.
Luckily, it doesn't blind them. That's good. But we can't really look at them and figure out what they're doing, right? So we have to figure it out a different way. So the way we're doing it is we're looking at the shapes of their eyes. And the cool thing about vision is that it's all physics. So if I can see how big the lens is and how long it is until it gets to the retina where it absorbs the light, I can actually model what it is that they see. And so we can figure out how all these eyes work if we know the minute details about how the eyes are built.
Yes.
And so that is a fun thing that we're just starting to play with.
Except for the ones that don't have eyes. And then you're just like, how do they?
They're easy. They're tick done. They're
no eyes. Got it.
No eyes. Check that box.
Oh my gosh.
Interestingly, the ones that don't have eyes, they usually have some really big antennas, so they're smelling or feeling their way.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but why this little group of not very many animals? Some have gone one way, some have gone another way, some are building eyes to do this, other ones are building eyes to do that. Like, that's really interesting. And to me, that suggests that out there in the open ocean is kind of a tough place to live. And you kind of gotta try a bunch of different things to see what works. And so to me, that's really interesting. It also helps us learn about what it's like to live out there in the open ocean, which is, it's really hard for us to relate to, right? It's really far away. It's really deep. It's just really kind of a foreign type of habitat to us that's really hard to relate to. I can understand what a butterfly is doing out in the yard, right? It's really hard to look at the flowers. I have no idea what these crustaceans are doing out there, right? What are they looking for? How are they living? How long do they live? What are they eating? I don't know. I don't know yet.
Yeah. But you will probably find out. I mean, you're going to keep doing your curiosity and finding different things. So we are at the point in the show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. I'm very interested to hear what your challenge is going to be for everyone, Dr. Karen.
Okay. So, you know how I said it's very hard to imagine what it's like out there in the open ocean? I want you guys to try to do that. And so imagine what it would feel like to swim in a giant vat of honey.
Okay.
Most of the animals that live out in the open ocean are kind of small, and water to small things is really thick and hard to get through, right? It's not like we can just splash through it.
Okay.
For most of these small things, the water is more like honey. So imagine you're swimming in this giant vat of honey. Ignore the fact that you can't breathe. We'll just imagine you can.
Okay.
Forget about that. But you're not allowed to touch the sides of the vat, and you're not allowed to sit on the bottom.
Okay.
How do you want to build your body? What kind of appendages or things do you want to add to your body so that you can easily swim around or float around or glide around in this honey? What are you going to do?
Wow.
How are you going to build your body?
I like that. I think that's a really good thing to think about because, you know, we as humans would be like, well, I need something to float on first, but you said, we're okay. Yeah. So this is a great one. Okay. All of you listeners out there, you guys do some heavy thinking about this and figure it out. And then share your answers with us because we would love to hear how you would solve this challenge.
And if you want to draw a picture of what you would look like or what these appendages would look like, that would be super cool too.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
So share that with us. But oh my gosh, this has been such a fun episode. I've learned so much about the open ocean, and now you've made me curious. And now I want to go see if I can learn about some of the other creatures that maybe have been discovered but haven't been, done a deep dive on, so to speak. So thank you so much for being on Solver for Kids, Dr. Karen.
Thank you, Dr. Karen.
Thank you guys for having me. It was super fun chatting with you.
What an absolutely fun episode. Jennifer, you said it right in the intro. When two things come together, oceans and marine biology and the technology that goes with them. What an absolutely mind-opening way to start thinking about something that we know about in general in a much different way.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I loved how we talked about all these different creatures and all the appendages that they have and how they move. And so I learned just so much from this, and also from meeting Dr. Karen and seeing her presentation at the Smithsonian Institution when I was there. These creatures are really amazing, like how they move through the water. And I think that her challenge is so cool because we have to think like we're one of these tiny creatures in the big open ocean.
Absolutely. I love this one. She gave us so many details that we know exactly what Dr. Karen wants us all to do. She would like us to imagine that we are one of these small creatures in a tiny, tiny ocean. She reminded us that we can't touch the sides or the bottom like we're so used to in swimming pools, that we are that small thing. And if we were, it would be a lot like swimming in honey, not like water, because we're so small that the water feels much thicker. So how would we want to design our own bodies to help us better move through that thicker fluid, which is the world we live in?
Yeah, the giant ocean and these little tiny creatures, it's amazing how to them it's so hard and difficult to swim around and everything's so thick and funny. So yeah, I think that that's fabulous. So everybody think about that and maybe design your creatures. And if you want to share it with us, you can find us on our social media. We are at KidSolve at Facebook, X, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where you'll find more information about Dr. Karen Osborn on this episode, but also all of our other episodes and all of the challenges, which are great to use in your classroom or just sitting around the dinner table at night with your kids and asking them about science. So make sure you check that out.
I completely agree, Jennifer, and not just working on this challenge, which is going to need a lot of imagination for how you would create a completely different body than we have right now. But I think this episode in specific may inspire some trips to the aquarium.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on the Science Podcast for Kids and Families. Solve it for kids.